Hi, I am Allie Camaletti, and you are listening to Snack Leadership. I will be talking about everything leadership, broken down into bite-sized pieces. You will hear what different leadership skills look like in organizations and how they can rise teams up or take them down. I help leaders build resilience and improve performance by bringing awareness to opportunity behaviors in my business. Spark your mindset. I provide leadership and sales coaching, as well as team building and guest speaking. My hope is for you to feel inspiration and to create a spark in your mindset. Today we are talking about team building. Team building in the sense of what it looks like to build a group of team members. Tom Stewart is a former Country Club COO turned vacation rental COO with Resort Realty of the Outer Banks. He loves life and living in the Outer Banks of North Carolina with his wife, Julie. The kids are long gone, so his cat, Max, fills their home now. As empty nesters, they spend their time traveling. Tom and I crossed paths when I was working with a client on Tybee Island. We both come from hospitality backgrounds and enjoy the vacation rental management industry now. I look forward to you hearing his knowledge on team building. Get ready to hear what team building is all about. Hi, Tom. Thank you so much for joining us today and talking about this leadership skill of choice being team building.
Well, Allie, I'm thrilled to be here, and thank you for asking me. It's good to see you again.
Yes. All right. I like to start off with, what is something you have recently learned about yourself?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think as we're talking about team building, one of the things you have to do on the administrative side, which is a little less exciting than throwing a party or taking everybody out bowling, is you have to do annual reviews. And we do this on an annual basis. We also follow up a program of meeting with people and documenting progress and that type of thing throughout the year. So we've got a little bit of a record. We're just not trying to remember, well, what happened last week. I've got to do this piece of paper, fill this out. Um, so usually at the beginning of each review process, I kind of restate, our goals and objectives and how actually I'd like the reviews written. I'd look for something a little more robust than one sentence answers or commentary, and something that people can really chew on. Well, this year, I guess because we're busy and I'd gotten overconfident with my team's ability to continue that process along, I didn't remind everybody of the basic steps of what I'm looking for in a review. And we do that so that our employees really have something that they can take home, they can put in their desk, or they can remember and they can refer back to, and we can refer back to.
Of
So
course.
I'm batting, I've got a leadership team of 6. I'm batting 550, 600. So some of them were like textbook. I said, these are better than the ones that I wrote. And I was excited about that. And then I saw a couple where there were a lot of blank spaces. And I go, I know what happened. I know they talked about everything, but none of it's documented. And I think we all know the importance of documentation for good and for bad. In this one case, particularly for good. And,
Yeah.
because we're looking at there's pay increases and opportunities that might come up, and we need to have it in writing. So I'm going to have to go back because I didn't do what I was supposed to do because I made an assumption, and that was a mistake. And it doesn't hurt. You're not insulting people's intelligence by reminding them of these are the things that we should be doing to make sure that we're all on the same page. So I'm going to go back, but when I do it, I'll probably express it the same way. And I have a staff meeting tomorrow where I'm going to address this, and I'm going to say, "Hey guys, mea culpa. I know this is how we do things, and I meant to go over this. I'm not going to say I should have. I'm going to say I meant to go over this, but we got busy, and I'll soften it a little bit. But I will get to the point and say this is why we do this, and I'm going to need some of you to go back and possibly redo the reviews. In some cases, it may be let's do a follow up email and say, hey, these are the things we covered. I just want to make sure it's understood. And we can just add that to the document. And then they don't look like they made a mistake and they didn't fill out the form because, there's perception and I don't want to be seen as undermining them with their staff or that they didn't do what they were supposed to do. It's a way to keep going forward. My goal is that we get them done correctly, the staff gets something out of them, and we can move forward. So I think that's something that's easy to happen. I've got a great team. I'm so fortunate, great professionals that operate really, really well. And I get so confident that I assume, and as I mentioned before, when you assume, you're generally going to make a mistake. I'm usually lucky when I make assumptions, but you can't just count on that. You really got to go back and be meticulous about what you do every day.
I love that you're speaking to this so much. And the reason why is because I'm seeing a trend in the work that I do with teams, and that is the struggle with risk. And so when I talk about risk, what I'm hearing you say is that there was this mistake, not a huge mistake, a small mistake,
Hmm.
but one, you're going to get vulnerable with them and you're going to point it out. And then you're going to talk about what happened because of that mistake and document it and ensure that it looks different next time.
That's exactly right.
Right. And so that is all risk. And part of being able to build teams that are comfortable with risk is having performance evaluations. That's a key piece of it. So I also love that you spoke to that too. And I'll always go back to the majority of people remember 20% of what you said and they revert back to old behaviors after 2 weeks.
That sounds about right.
And I think that helps a lot of leaders too when I'm talking with them because they get frustrated. They're like, "How come they don't remember everything I said?" And I'm like, "Oh no, just 20%." That's why you keep on touching on it.
Yep, it's so important, and that's why I'll go back and we'll review this type of thing, and it goes to a deeper effect too. Also, is that it's just not about this individual step in the process. It's by the same way that I've tried to develop my executive team and given them tools and education and resources and opportunity. Um, we've all got to go back and use the basketball analogy, how deep is your bench and all that type of stuff. But they need to continue to develop the people that work for them. And that's all
Yes.
part of that big process of, well, I always feel overwhelmed. Well, have you thought about delegating? Well, I don't know how to delegate, or I don't know who to delegate to. And I said, well, if we spent time reviewing our staff and growing them and we're doing the same things that we do and you're doing with them, then that question will answer itself over time. So there's a short immediate need to get the review done, but there's really a long term objective, which is to develop the staff further on down the pike. Not everybody will take to it. Not everybody wants to be a leader. I think that's important to know. And not everybody wants to be, needs all that attention. They're sort of self driven, but it's important that everybody be given that opportunity, and it has to spread through the organization in every direction. So can't do it all ourselves.
No, we cannot. And let's go back a little bit and talk about when did you first really embody this skill of building really great cohesive teams?
Wow, I'd have to say, it's one of those things where it it's an evolution. You learn from good people. You also learn from not so good people. I think when I was in my first management position, I had a boss. We were great friends. He was a great guy. He was a horrible boss. I mean, he was just miserable. And the people that worked, I was an assistant manager, and I felt like I was always running interference. Like, well, so and so didn't mean it that way. This is what we're really trying to do. And I was like, well, this is really exhausting. And at the end of the day, was the product great? Did we do a great job? Absolutely. But boy, was it a lot of work. It could have been a lot simpler. So
Yeah.
bad bosses are great teachers. Don't ever tell them that, but it's something that you can take with you because eventually he left and I stayed and I moved up, and well, that speaks for itself. But it was a process, and it happened when I was young and I was trying to develop who I was. And my first priority then was, am I doing a good job?
Yeah.
And I think when you're trying to figure all that out, it's pretty easy to be driven and drive hard and work hard and move forward. But if you're not paying attention to the people around you, if you're not noticing what's going on, I think in the long term you're going to sell yourself short. Maybe in sales you really do need to focus on, sell and focus on yourself, because that's who's making the real difference. But if you're going to go into a general management position or a broader type of management, you really need to be aware, acutely aware, I would say, of what's happening around you, what people are thinking, what they're saying, how they're responding.
Yeah.
And that's when we bring up the big E word, and you know what I'm talking about is empathy. And
Yep.
I think that early on I realized that I sort of had a knack for that, or I was
Yeah.
interested in what people were thinking, and not that I tailored my behavior to make them happy, but
Yes.
and it's a little self-centered. I tailored my behavior to get them to do the work that needed to be done because we were so busy. And if you call that selfish, maybe it is, but there's the objective is to get the work done and help the company grow. We all grow with it. So,
I would not call that selfish. I would call that good leadership.
well, thank you.
As we go into that, I mean, what have
Hmm.
you experienced when observing other leaders and organizations who are really good at building good teams?
Well, I think it's interesting. I read an article just the other day, and it talked about what are Gen Z looking for, and it
Yeah.
said appreciation and a sense of belonging. And then I go, well, I've got a millennial who's a kid also, and what does he want? He wants to be appreciated and belong. I'm a Gen Xer. What do I want, and what have I always wanted? I said, so that never changes. And you really have to go, well, it's not that different. So I look back and go, well, what are the things that made me tick? What are the things that made me respond and want to do more? And it was when my company or my boss recognized me, and also when I felt like I was part of a larger purpose. Granted, we were just going to, I had to set up the dining room when I was back in the country club business, set up the dining room for Sunday brunch. But boy, when it was done right and everybody came in and had a great time, you felt really good, and it took everybody working together to make that happen. So that's a kind of a weird answer to a straightforward question, but
No, and it takes me back to when I worked at a local resort here in Central Oregon called Sun River. And I used to do the basically execution of events at
hmm
the resort. And we would have something where the Great Hall, we'd have to flip it.
hmm
And you can relate to this being in
oh
that
yes,
industry. What would happen is in the Great Hall, we'd have the wedding, and then we literally would have to flip the entire room as fast as we could into
hmm
being ready for an actual meal. And so, what would happen is there would be an email that would go out to everybody in the resort, and everybody would show up, and we would flip that room. And I am not kidding you, in 20 minutes.
hmm
Like it just was beautiful. And I loved that part because it felt so much like a team and connection, and everybody just really cared about the bigger purpose.
I like that story. I've experienced that many times. I
Right?
don't I don't know that we were as good as getting everybody in the whole resort and the whole company to come in and do it at once. That's impressive. I'm going to
Well,
make a note of that.
obviously, there were still people that needed to be taken care of. So it was the people that had the availability, but
That's
still,
great. That's
yeah,
great.
it was awesome. So, and I think it's easy to remember the negative experiences. And I too have learned from bosses that had a lot of opportunity. But what have you observed when somebody really struggled with putting good teams together in an organization?
I think many times I look at somebody who has trouble doing that, and it's really, if I hired the person or I inherited the person, however you want to put it, if they're part of my team and my organization, I really look at it goes back to me going, there's something missing. This individual didn't get into the position they're in um, just as a fluke. Something happened. There was some reason somebody made a decision to put them there, or I did. And if they're struggling, it means that there's more work that I have to do. um, and sometimes, it's a matter of maturity, and it takes time for those times kinds of things. I'm not saying you have to be young or old. Maturity can vary all over the map. But I look at people and go, well, let's go back and see. So I've got a team, let's say, of a half a dozen people, my executive team. They each function at different levels. Some of them are very adept, very professional, know what they're doing, hardly need any guidance at all. It's more about touch base, touch base, touch base. I have other
Right?
folks who've come into the industry or who are starting out in their careers and they need more attention. And really, it's about building blocks. And I like to use the analogy with them about columns. I recently read a book by Ken Follett, Pillars of Something. It was written 35 years ago, and it happens to revolve around the medieval ages and cathedrals and columns and arches. And I kept reading the book, and I kept thinking about really what I'm doing with these folks is I'm saying you're building your column, and let's start at the bottom and we're going to work our way up. And as you progress through your career, you really sort of have to focus on what you're doing and who you are and how you're treating people and how you're getting things done. And as that happens, and as you grow, whether it's maturity wise or experience wise, you're building this column upward. And all of a sudden, you get a little bit further up in the air, and you can look over and you notice, hey, there's all these other people building these columns as well. And at that point, you can start building those arches that are going to connect them and eventually hold the structure up. And you follow where that analogy is going. But it's you've got to be at the right point in your career where you can start building those arches, where you can start looking out and going, well, how can I reach out? Let's say a rental manager, how can I reach out to the maintenance manager? And instead of being on two different sides of the same coin, really just say we're really just the same coin, and that's all we need to know and work together. So I try and look at, well, individually, and the reviews are a big part of that, to say, what do you need? What are you missing, or what could you use more of, and where do you need more guidance? Is it in conflict resolution? Well, let's talk about that. You mentioned Sue Jones recently. Well, I brought her in. This was a year and a half ago or so, and we sat down and we did the DISC assessment, which is,
Yeah.
so what a wonderful tool. Go ahead and say, well, this is how I manage and how I lead and how I do things, and then here's how everybody else does. But the neat thing about that tool is you go, well, this is how I am perceived by others based on their personality traits, and this is how I perceive them. And you can learn how to tailor your communication to actually speak to the individual when you need to, and that's part of that empathy building. May not be built into you, but you can learn how to take advantage of that, for not to take advantage of anybody, but to get things moving forward. So when I see people struggling with teams, to this day I'll say, hey, if we looked at their DISC assessment, let's take a look at
Yeah.
that and say, are they not hearing what you're saying because it really is not in their nature? So how can we tailor that? And I always like to say, take the high road. Who knows? Maybe everybody takes the high road. We'll meet at the top. So eventually, so you really have to, for a manager or a leader who's struggling with building a team, sometimes you just have to spend, me or whoever's in charge has to spend more time and really take the time to get to know what the issues are, and spend the money maybe, but
Yes.
definitely spend the time to get things on track. It's you want to assume that everybody operates the same, but they don't, and you have to tailor your style.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's what I do in my business, but I'm not
Mm.
always enjoying when I go into companies and I see things and I'm like, there's a change here that I recommend. And those are hard conversations because they might be trying to squeeze a square in a round hole, right? And that's where the tension has been coming up. And that's why they are asking me to come in and kind of do some team building and have that conversation of, let's see how this person can fit into a role that honors their strengths more, instead of still trying to push them into this role, which I find it a lot in the vacation rental management industry because of the growth we're experiencing recently.
And that's so true, and maybe you're successful, but you've got to be ready and willing to admit that maybe you won't be successful. And the
Totally.
round, the peg, and the square, and the square, and the hole. And I mean, maybe it just won't work, and you might have to make a hard decision. I mean, I think the worst thing you can do sometimes, or oftentimes, is, and I call it, kick the can down the road.
Yes.
Is we do that, we go, well, they're not working out here. Let's go stick them over here, and that works great. That one department's going, yay, and the other department's going, wait a second. And really, it does show that, and it's just, this is a fortunate or unfortunate part of leadership. Sometimes you have to make hard decisions. um, and the key to that, again, is how do you do that? I mean, you have to do it for the good of the company. But an old mentor once told me, if you have to let somebody go, and that's a last resort, I think it shows maybe a little bit of a failure of management, because they didn't get what they needed. But sometimes there's just not the right fit, whatever that means, and that's a whole other debate. But you can ruin a person's day, just don't ruin their life. And really, that's what it's about. And that even sounds kind of harsh, but there's a way to talk to folks and say, hey, I think we need to part ways and move on, and I'll help you out however I can if that's appropriate. But barring anything that crosses the ethical and moral lines or legal lines. If you're just trying to build a team, sometimes you have to have those decisions that need to be made. So, and that's the tough part. The good part's when everything's clicking and everybody's happy and we're all making money and everybody's doing well, but that's not always the case. I'm not gonna say that it's always what is it, puppy dogs and rainbows here.
We
No.
call it butterflies and rainbows out on the West Coast.
Uh-huh. So we have our challenges, and the Outer Banks is notorious for being a difficult spot for people to live in. It's like a
Yeah.
lot of resort towns. Housing is very expensive. Our employees commute an hour and a half away. It's
Yeah, it's
considerable
tough.
distances, and how do we keep them motivated? It's just not about the manager and their little group. It's about the next line and the next line of the line employees. I haven't had to clean a bathroom in quite a while, and I know it's hard work because I've done it under the pressure of getting people in. But without those folks and keeping them motivated, you're really not going to get very far in the vacation rental business. So remember your roots. Remember what really needs to be done. It's nice to talk about dynamic pricing and acquiring new inventory and getting new software, but at the end of the day, a guest is looking for some very basic things:
Yeah.
clean, well maintained home, and all that good stuff.
And in the end, we're really in the people business.
And that's exactly right, whether our customers are internal or external. And I do remind my team often. I say, well, you've got your guests and you've got your owners. I said, but in the position you're in, you also have your counterpart or a person in another department. They're your customers too. You
Yep.
have to really look at it that way and understand that their needs are at this particular moment in time just as important as, or more important maybe, than what a guest might have in front of them, because they're trying to take care of a guest. So look at the big picture. That's part of my arches analogy. You get good enough at what you're doing, then you can start looking outward and build those arches and see what else is going on and see how those people can help you look good. And that goes back to the old, we've had people, or I've had people in the past, who are so good at what they do, and some of that is because they've made it that they're the only people that can do that work. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's fun to point out to them and say, I'd love to promote you, but you're so indispensable. We talk about that, but I don't know how often we actually tell the employee that. Say,
Right.
well, they've made themselves indispensable. Well, has anybody told them? And see what their reaction is. Let's see how we can make this better so that you can delegate, so that you can have more free time, so that you can make bigger decisions, so that, by the way, when this new job opens up, you might have a great opportunity there. But right now, I can't afford to move you. That
Oh,
that
I love that, Tom. Thank you for pointing that out.
and
That
we did
is
that
so
we did
true.
we did that recently. We're working on that. So
Who is one of your favorite mentors?
I have to go back to a fella who's in his 80s now, very debonair, very polished kind of guy, from Georgia, South Georgia, way down South Georgia. But he was a leader of mine, and he's considerably older than I am. But he really taught me a lot about delegation. He's kind of more old school. And that was the big thing: how to delegate, how to delegate. We didn't talk a lot about empathy, but I think they're intertwined. And he was just very good at that. And by doing so, by letting you fail, he gave you the confidence, because he didn't punish you. I mean, there was no repercussion except, boy, Tom, I think you could do better next time. And I was like, yes, Mr. Thomas, and that was his name. But I wanted to please him because I knew that he wanted to see me succeed. And it was just
Yeah.
one of those things where you could tell it was sincere. He said, we have work to do, but I would like to see you succeed, and I'll give you what you need to do that. Um, I'll just really briefly. There was one time I was in the country, back in the country club business, and we were doing that big flip, and it was one of the first time I'd done it. And we were getting ready for a second wedding of the day, and we're running around like crazy. We're a little short staffed, and I was in charge of it. And he walked into the dining room and went to the service station to get a cup of coffee. This was on a Saturday afternoon, and he's wearing a suit. and I'm like got my tie off, jacket's hung up somewhere, and I'm building a stage or whatever. And he comes in, he gets his coffee, and he's over there, and he's kind of nodding his head, and he walks away. At the moment, I was like, I need his help. Doesn't he see how hard I'm working? I need him out here. Of course, he's like 30 years older than me, but still, that's what I thought. I'm a young guy. Later on, I went and talked to him. I said, "Hey, Mr. Thomas," very formal back then. I said, "What did you think when you walked in there?" And he said he knew where I was going with this. Why weren't you helping? And he said, "I knew you had it covered." And he just kind of stopped me in my tracks and was like, "Yep," he called me on it. He's like, "I know that if I had stepped in to offer help, I would have undermined you. Your staff would have wondered, oh boy, does this guy know what he's doing? Because the big man, and he was about 6'2", has to step in and ask the question." And I thought probably a lot more about it than he did, but he saw right through me right then and there. And when he said that, I go, you know what? That's what it's about, is how do you build a team? How do you give people the tools? How do you show them the trust that you
Right?
know that they can do it? And he knew I was going to get it done because there was a bride walking in the door in 2 hours. There's no way I wasn't. And as exhausted as I was, it was a good feeling to know that he trusted me to do that. And
So good. So good. How about a quote?
well, this one I actually, when I do a staff meeting, I do a deck and a PowerPoint, and we've got our stuff we need to cover. But I always open it with a quote. And the last meeting we had, and I've got another one scheduled tomorrow. The last meeting we had, I threw up Albert Einstein, and it was so appropriate for the time. Um, and I've got to hear, anyone who's never made a mistake has never tried anything new.
So true. Absolutely.
And we've heard that phrased a million different ways, but I think it needs to be brought up again because we're going out of our planning season and into our execution season. And I know we might be rusty on a couple little things. We're introducing new software to run our operational side. I know as much as we've planned for it and trained for it, that things are going to happen, and we all just need to go, it's okay. We're going to get it done. There might be a glitch or the message got sent to the wrong person, but we'll get through it because we've all worked so hard on it. I know it's going to work. And if we do make a boo boo, well, that's fine.
It happens. And that
It does.
shows that there's an opportunity to evaluate the risk of it and shift it for next time. Good
That's
stuff.
right. Hmm.
So much we could talk about. My mind is going crazy with things that I want to ask you, but we'll keep the time tied in, and we're going to close with, is there anything that you are just snacking on right now that you love to have?
There's a, it's almonds, walnuts, um, dried cherries, or and pepitas, and it's called omega-3, and they sell it at Walmart, and I love it. It gives me my boost in the afternoon. So, anyways, it sounds kind of healthy. I think it's healthy.
It sounds healthy. Healthy is not a bad thing, Tom. Healthy is a good thing. We like that. I love it. I can't thank you enough. You have brought up so many little tidbits that I know are going to be helpful for others to hear. And I'm just so grateful for your time and your expertise.
Well, thanks. This has been really fun and great talking to you, Allie.
Thank you for tuning in to Snack Leadership. I hope you felt inspiration, motivation, and felt your mindset spark. Snack Leadership is recorded and produced by myself, Ali Camilletti, and music by Shireen Amini.